when you have no bootstraps. King says it's a cruel joke to tell a man to pull himself up by his bootstraps when he has no bootstraps. So things about Marxism, and Marxism for me is a methodology for unpacking social structures or social constructs, and definitely for dealing with white supremacy. Okay. And when you hear people talk about Marxism, what I've seen is that it's always, and I hope I don't get in trouble. I hope you don't get you in trouble, Bishop.
No, you're good.
White, heterosexual Christian men who complain about Marxism. It's never poor people. It's never black people or brown people. And so Marxism was a critique of powers and systems of oppression that kept poor people poor and rich people rich. And think about this. And this is not rocket science, but think about this. Every movement, social justice movement, that sought to overthrow white hegemonic structures, white power structures, that
give us an example, White, of that statement you just made. Every movement. Give us a point in time in history through the life of Dr. King where you saw that active.
Okay, so let me finish this statement. Every movement that sought to overthrow white supremacy, male supremacy, Christian supremacy, has been labeled as communist and Marxist. Okay, so let's go back to the union movement, women's suffrage, women's right to vote, the civil rights movement. And as late as the anti-war movement, and as late as Black Lives Matters movement. Black Lives Matter has been labeled as being communist. And whenever those who are in power, Frederick Douglass says this, and Dr. King repeats this, and many others, power concedes nothing without demands. And whenever you make those demands on power to take your foot off of our neck, to give us the rights that's written into the founding documents of America, that being the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments, we gave Black people citizenship, rights, the right to vote. We had the right to vote in the 1700s. Okay, 1800s. After the Civil War, we were granted the right to vote. Black people were voting in the 1800s. But it wasn't until 1965, with the passage of the Voting Rights Act, that it really was actualized. Because we had Black politicians in the 1800s. Hiram Revels and PBS Pinchback, the first Black governor of Louisiana in the 1800s.
Wow.
Yeah, and so now you got Trump and others talking about voter suppression and voter fraud. They refused to seat Hiram Revels, who was the first Black congressman from the South in Mississippi. They refused to seat this man because they said he wasn't a U.S. citizen in the 1800s.
Wow.
Okay, so any movement that has been counterintuitive or antithetical to white Christian male power has been labeled as communist and Marxist.
You said something one time in a conversation, and don't lose your train of thought, but it's cutting it straight. So there's some things you say that I want you kind of, you hit the nail on the head with the hammer, but I want you to just drive that in, because I know what these kind of conversations, and I've told you this privately, White, has done for me, man, personally. I make no qualms about it. For those who are watching, and especially preachers, if you want to make sure your social justice game is on tight with facts, not just with rhetoric, then look up Chad White. He offers personal class time because I'm one of his students. But Doc, you said something to me one time about this perception of power in this country and why our willingness not to share it. Could you deal with just a little bit of that?
Yeah. So we talk about hegemonic structures. Okay, hegemonic deals with power structures. I believe, and I'm sure I'm not the first, scholar to come up with this ideology. Michael Foucault, and I don't want to get too academic, but he deals with power. I believe every relationship is about power, whether it's in marriage, whether it's on your job, and back to Marxism, producers and workers, the bourgeoisie, the proletariat, the whole nine yards. It's about it's about power, and with that, with those in power fail to understand is that they see power, in particular white men. Let's go ahead and call it what it is. And I'm quite confident there are some platforms I would never get on, so I'm okay. I might as well go ahead and cut it straight.
And that's not all white men, but there are those.
No, by the stretch of imagination. No, I mean we have some. I mean I've got some great friends who are colleagues and freedom fighters.
And I ain't trying to save nobody. That's just being accurate.
Absolutely. But they see power as a pie. And they feel that if I share it with somebody, it's limited. They see freedom and equality as a pie, cake. And if I cut it up and give it to other people, I've got to give away some of what belongs to me so other people can have it. Now, again, this is a Christian Bible-based conversation. That's why the prophet says, watch this, let justice roll down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. Because if it's water and it's flowing, it's limitless. If your justice is limitless, if I'm in power, I don't mind sharing. Yes. Because if I share, it's limitless. And then I begin to build, watch this, authentic, beloved community, a Kingian concept, or what Jesus Christ calls the kingdom of God. And so this sharing of power, this sharing and giving away, which agape is all about, and that's why I don't understand how there are Christians, in particular white Christians, that are doing some of the things they're doing in becoming antithetical to social justice, is because the issue of agape means I have this selfless love and I'm willing to give away and to do things, watch this, even when it's not for my benefit, if it's a blessing to somebody else.
Wow. When we look at that, and you were describing Marxism, I interrupted you. I want you to complete your thought on that and then go to this issue of capitalism. And you've talked about all of it, but just so that we could be straight, and I know for me, I had to ask you repeatedly. Now, other folk may be smarter than me, but hell, ain't their show. So
so back to Marxism, Karl Marx, Russian, philosopher. And so again, he seeks to deal with these power structures between producers and workers. And he understands that the producers want the workers to keep on working, because as long as the workers are working, those who are producers are going to make money. And so I hate to do this, but there's this concept of theory called critical race theory. And this is getting a lot of buzz right now. And critical race theory says a lot of things, but one of the things that Marx talks about that's parallel to critical race theory is conflict theory. White people will never and have never in mass done anything for Black people that they don't benefit from. Okay?
Wow.
Right? That's what critical race theory is all about.
Wow.
Marx has this theory called conflict theory. And conflict theory says this, that those who are producers, they want the workers to keep on working. And so guess what? If the workers go on strike, I don't mind giving them a little money. So if I'm making, Bishop, if I'm making 10 million a year and I'm paying my workers 4 million, I can give them another million just as long as they keep on working. Because I'm still coming out ahead. Yeah. And so conflict theory, when you look at strikes with unions, conflict theory says give them a little something to keep them working, because as long as they're working, we making money. And so that's what that's all about. And so we go back to conflict theory and critical race theory, that white America has never done anything in mass for Black people that they didn't benefit from. Let's go back to the Civil War. The Civil War was not about emancipating slaves. It was about protecting the Union. Slavery just happened to be the issue that it was all about. 1867, I believe, with the 14th Amendment, Black people getting the right to vote. It wasn't because the politicians just had a change of heart and recognized that black people should have the right to participate in the American democratic experience. It was, if black people can vote, we can keep the South from rising against the North and keep the Confederacy from gaining the power. It was done so the North can keep the Confederacy at bay. Plessy versus Ferguson, 1954, Brown versus Board of Topeka Education, 1954. 1955. All of a sudden, white America decides to integrate or get rid of Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal, and say that black children should have the right to go to school with white kids, that separation of education is not constitutional. Well, Thurgood Marshall fights that case. This ain't the first time Thurgood Marshall fought that case. We just came out of a world war. And America was going around the world preaching democracy, but yet they were still treating their black citizens as second-class citizens. And so they figured that if we go ahead and do this and get rid of separate but equal and provide integration, but watch this, Bishop. The concept was that when Thurgood Marshall and others said, well, how soon, what's the timeline for integrating? They said, with all deliberate speed. Now watch this, Bishop. I'm gonna bless you on this. Listen to this. I ain't gonna charge you for this one, bro. This is lanyard, which at home means I ain't gonna charge this for free. During the 1955, 54, 55, that's when the majority of white Christian private schools started. You know why? Because they didn't want their kids going to school with black kids. They took tax money from the public schools to fund white Christian private schools. And they were called segregation schools.
Wow.
So when you go back and look at private schools in New Orleans, in other places, most of them started in the 1950s.
Wow. So it's that same concept when you talk about Dr. King, who was not only fighting for us the right to sit where we wanted to sit, but also fighting for the right for us to have money, that when we sit where we wanted to sit, we could afford what we wanted to buy.
There you go. So watch this. So King studies Karl Marx. He studies communism. And he reads Karl Marx, the Communist Manifesto, and he pivots and he becomes an economic Marxist. Now, hear me well, people. King was not a communist. I don't care what white America says. I don't care what the FBI or J. Edgar Hoover says. King preaches a sermon about why communism does not line up with Christianity. And the primary reason was because communists got it wrong about their belief about God. And secondly, because communists use people as ends. Means to an end rather than an end. They thingified, to use a Cornell West word, they thingified people. Okay. And so he says communism is not the answer. Now, King he used a Hegelian dialect.
Time out. You got to explain. Now, you know that was one of the words y'all tease me about think. Explain thingify, how Dr. West uses that.
Okay, so to thingify someone, so again, man, I am not trying to be deep, but Martin Buber, a German philosopher, talks about I, thou versus I, it. So when I treat you as an it and not a thou, I diminish and minimize your humanity. So this is what slavery was all about. If I can make up my mind that you are not human. So we go back to the 3/5 law concept about blacks in America. So when I can treat you as a thing, I can brand you like you're one of my cattle. I can castrate you. I can hang you. Okay, remember, the hanging of black folk or Negroes, if you will, that was a social gathering. People left church to go out and see black folk get hung. There's a story W.E.B. Du Bois tells about when he first went to Atlanta, was in Atlanta, and in Noonan, Georgia, they hung a black man. And they had to get extra trains leaving Atlanta so that that white people could get there, and they left church on a Sunday.
Wow. Lord have mercy.
I mean, they cut this man. I forgot his name escapes my memory. They cut his fingers off. They cut parts of his body off as souvenirs.
Lord have mercy.
And Dubois tells a story that as he went to meet with the newspaper editor who wrote the story about it, he saw the man's fingers in the window at a butcher shop.
Lord have mercy.
So when I thingify you, and again, Bishop, that's why when Hillary Clinton called black men, young black men, super predators, that was in the vein of thingifying. And so that's why you know, when black men or black people do something, they're thugs and villains. But when white boys flip over cars after the World Series, they're just
storm the Capitol.
Yeah, storm the Capitol. They're patriots.